Might take you an hour, could take a minute, that's okay, as long as you're in it.
Hi, I'm Len Ciccone, and I'm from Ciccone Brown Company. We're here today to talk about one of our campaigns, the Life is Good Ping podcast. And with me to tell you about it is Robin Mack and Becca Giller on the team. And guys, this thing has been taking awards by storm. It's the podcast of the year with PR News. Won a gold bell ringer, won a bronze anvil. It's up for a couple of others. How does it make you feel to be so honored by your colleagues?
Amazing. It's quite an honor. I kind of blacked out the past year of the podcast because it was truly like being on tour. So to have it come back into my life in such a wonderful way feels good.
Tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do with the agency, and then we'll get right into the podcast.
I'm Robin Mack. I've been with Ciccone Brown for 18 years now. I'm a senior vice president at the agency.
Becca, you're on the digital team, I take it?
Yes, I am.
I don't know.
I am a senior account executive at Ciccone Brown. I've been with the agency a couple of years now and have loved every second of it.
For those of us who maybe didn't go through it with you, what the heck is a Ping podcast?
Okay, so it's a podcast. It was for our client, Life is Good. If you don't know Life is Good, they're a Boston-based apparel and lifestyle brand. But what they do is really use their products as a vehicle to spread their core mission, which is to spread the power of optimism. So in 2019, they were celebrating their 25th anniversary. The company was 25 years old, and they settled on a campaign concept, which was coined Something Good. And the whole premise of this was really to try to galvanize a movement that focused on the good and change people's perspective of, not necessarily ignoring the adversity or hardships that were happening in their lives, but to really ensure that they took time out to focus on the good things also happening in their lives and the lives around them. And the belief is that what you focus on grows.
Why a podcast? Of all the different social media and all the channels and the idea of, YouTube, but why a podcast?
So a podcast for a few reasons. The brand, being 25 years old, was looking to ensure they stayed relevant with their current audience, but also engage and tap into a younger audience. And we knew that podcasts, there's 67 million listeners out there, but 65% of those, like over half, are under the age of 34. It was a platform that we could own. We could own the message, own the conversation, and we also could bring on some really interesting, inspirational people to share their stories.
There's 800,000 podcasts to choose from in 2020. With that many podcasts, how do you just decide we're going to make a podcast and get people's attention, which you did, but how do you even begin, to say, yeah, we're going to be the one out of 800,000 that people decide to tune into?
Well, the thing with podcasts is it definitely is a cluttered space, but you really are only trying to find your niche audience. So we did a couple things. We had incredible guests. So we had Ringo Starr, Katie Couric, Bridget Moynihan, Scott Avett, to name just a few. We also had the brand's co-founders, which are Bert and John Jacobs, who had never been podcast hosts before, but they were incredibly charismatic, very fun, and very creative. So that combination was a winning combination. And then we just to make sure we differentiated ourselves a bit more, we added a ping pong charity component to the podcast. So you couldn't see this happening, but ping pong actually sounds pretty cool over podcast sound. So we had each guest compete against Bert or John, and it was a charity challenge. And so whomever won got to donate to their charity of choice.
Everyone wants to know, who was the best ping pong player?
Okay, well, I'm proud to say that the women represented. And so it's possibly a tie between Katie Couric and Bridget Moynihan. And both of them, well, Bridget, she's a former athlete, super sporty, obviously so in shape. So, she had the competitive grit going. But Katie was kind of the dark horse surprise. Like, I thought she would be almost annoyed she'd have to play ping pong. She was so fun, so engaged with it. She would not quit. She was like, one more round, one more round. She kept playing like best out of 3, then it was best out of 5. She was diving for shots. There was like, we were in a flat, so there was like couches and, you know, it was people, someone's home in New York City. And she was hilarious. So I think my award would have to go to Katie. She had the fiercest competitive spirit.
Tell me about the success of the podcast.
We did a lot of research to understand, you know, what is considered success? How do we know if we're reaching the right audience? Is it resonating with audiences? And we found benchmarks that if you have, you know, 3,400 downloads of your entire podcast, that's considered to be in the top 10% of podcasts. We ranked around average of 4,000 downloads per episode over the course of 9 guests. So I think we're upwards of pushing a little above 40,000 in total downloads. So that really puts us into the top 5% for podcast performance. The other thing that the podcast did was obviously reach that younger target audience. We were able to break down and see that it was, I think, 80% millennial that we were reaching. And then as a result, we had other partnerships open up. So JetBlue ended up becoming really interested in airing the podcast. So glad that we filmed this on video. And we're now able to broadcast the video on the JetBlue, their JetBlue in-flight entertainment. And then there's a bunch of other cross-promotional partners. Based on our lineup, we have a long-standing partnership now with Katie Couric. They loved the idea of kind of perpetuating this something good, as well as Ringo Starr. We started to cross-pollinate with his audience. He does a peace and love movement. So it all just started to, come together, and people aligned and the brands aligned, and the topic of conversation just felt really relevant.
Give me a little bit of an idea of what it takes to put on this kind of podcast, because what I understand is this was done in various locations. I heard stories of pickup trucks and with ping pong tables being carried up, 5 floors, and it's a little more than just the technology of a podcast to do this one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite a bit to really make everything come together and come to life. It took everything from building a ping pong table by hand to, as you mentioned, driving a pickup truck around New England to our various locations. But within there too, we knew right away when we were going to have the element of ping pong present itself, there's no way that we can't add a video element to this entire project. So it took a lot of careful considerations to make sure that we had proper audio quality for our podcast that we would be producing, and we have our programming scheduled for the podcast episode. But we also had very strong visuals and very strong recording of the ping pong matches themselves and the interviews themselves. So that required a good separate set of programming to make sure that we would be able to capture everything that we wanted to and create really very quality pieces of content that would be digested by Life is Good's audience.
You had some pretty serious guests. You had a Beatle. What's the key to getting folks like that? I mean, that's starting right from the top tier. How did that happen?
Yeah, honestly, we were even surprised at the willingness to participate. But really it came down to the topic, the subject matter. People were very open and willing to talk about things that were positive and good and spreading good vibes and spreading good news, but they also were willing to share their personal stories about how they too had, lost loved ones, or, one of our guests, Casey Harris, was a blind keyboardist in a really, up and rising band, but they wanted to kind of share this message of, yeah, you can have really bad times and you go through really dark things, but if you put forth the energy and effort and really focus on the good, that will drive your success and, really drive your spirit towards something that's a lot more productive and a lot more positive.
Having, gone through this and, a lot of stories were told, as Robin had mentioned. You know, what did you find most touching or most inspiring from all the things that you heard during creating this podcast?
There were quite a lot of inspiring stories that were shared from everybody. You know, the guests that were on, we encouraged them to share a story of a time where things might not have always been most optimistic, and they had to, you know, adjust their outlook to get through those. I would say the most inspiring to me is certainly Katie Couric. She was an amazing guest, and her story as well, when, you know, early on in her career when she was with the Today Show, she unfortunately suffered a huge loss of her husband to colon cancer. And she very well could have let that affect her very negatively, but she took it in a direction that I think was so inspiring, where she was really the person to bring to light these issues that people don't always talk about on daytime television. So for her to really take that stand and to make an entire movement, it's called the Katie Couric effect for a reason. That's, you know, after she had aired her story, screenings for colon cancer went up by 50%.
Tell me, what was Saucony Brown's role in the project?
We came up with the concept, and then from there, our role took on, you know, whatever it takes to make this happen. So it was a little bit like a startup needs a concert tour with, you know, a creative shop in the middle of this. So everything from, you know, the content of the episodes, the episode formats, writing scripts for promotions, you know, a teaser with Ringo Starr, getting into the studio and actually recording the intros and the outros and writing all of that. And then, you know, everything from the interview questions themselves, you know, knowing everything about our guests so that we can be, you know, personalize these questions and make sure we get the right stories out of everybody. And then the logistics. I mean, Becca was like crazy with logistics, booking. It was a different location in every city. So we were in people's private homes. We were in hotels. We were in, you know, ping pong bars. We did enlist Dan Fox. He's from Wondersmith Audio. So he was really our co-producer, and he's a sound engineer. And we could not have pulled this off without him. So we were kind of the ideas and the creativity and the content and the logistics, but then came in Dan. And if things did not work from a sound perspective, the whole thing would have fallen apart. So he was a true talent and perfectionist and that on that side of things. And he helped so much with the edit and just bringing everything succinctly together. So between Dan and our team, it was a pretty perfect pair.
So what was the biggest thing that you took away? What's your biggest learning from having created and produced this project?
I've learned a lot through this entire project, and it has certainly challenged and tested myself, and I know the rest of the team, to really be creative and think outside the box. And as Robin had mentioned, you know, get the job done for whatever we need to make this project work. And we did it in glorious fashion. And I think the most important thing I've learned really is teamwork.
Now, having gone through this, it was a lot of work, but it was very successful. What advice would you have to marketers who might be considering either doing a podcast or even just wanting to reach younger consumers?
My advice would be that, you know, don't be afraid of producing a podcast. There's a whole spectrum of podcasting, and it can be as scrappy as you just kind of having a microphone in your kitchen and, you know, phone people and it's done over the phone, or it can be a little bit more produced. I'd say we were definitely in the middle. You know, we went to different locations, so we were called, you know, they were in the field interviews, but can be more challenging to troubleshoot for sound, but it also makes for a lot more interesting content. So I would just say you can produce whatever it is that you really want to own as a message. And so it's a wonderful medium for that. And don't be afraid to just try it.
Life is good.